Late-night hotel encounter with two stunning alien visitors. My craziest story ever. The empty lounge. The storm arrived the same night Dante Marlowe did, both of them carrying too much weight. He'd driven north from Edinburgh on impulse, needing distance from the apartment he'd shared with Claire, from the ring box still sitting on his desk, from the careful architecture of a life that had collapsed in a single conversation. The Cascade Moon Hotel emerged from the Scottish darkness like something out of time, all stone turrets and leaded windows, perched on a cliff above an invisible sea. At 3 a.m, sleep felt impossible. His room was beautiful in that haunted way old places are, but the silence pressed against his ears until he couldn't stand it. Dante pulled on jeans and a sweater, padding barefoot down the curved staircase to the ground floor. The hotel felt abandoned, which made sense given the off-season and the weather. His footsteps echoed on marble floors. The lounge was a relic of another era. Leather wingback chairs, a mahogany bar that gleamed dully in low light, windows that rattled with wind. He expected emptiness. Instead, he found them. 2 women sat at a small table near the fireplace, though no fire burned there. One had copper hair that seemed to move of its own accord, cascading over bare shoulders. Her eyes, when they lifted to meet his, were the color of molten amber. No, deeper than that, like looking into the heart of a star. She wore a dress that might have been bronze silk or liquid metal, he couldn't quite tell. The other had black hair shot through with midnight blue, and skin so pale it seemed to glow faintly. Her eyes were an impossible shade of violet that shifted to indigo as she smiled at him. Something about the way light bent around them made Dante's breath catch. "We were hoping someone interesting would appear," the copper-haired one said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place, somewhere between Celtic lilt and something far more ancient. "This storm is dreadfully boring when you're trapped with only your sister for company." Celine exaggerates, though she's not wrong about interesting. Her gaze traveled over Dante with frank appreciation that made heat rise in his chest. "I'm Nix. Won't you join us? You look like a man who needs a story, or perhaps to become one." Dante hesitated at the threshold, every rational instinct screaming that something here wasn't right. The way they sat without quite seeming to touch their chairs, how the air around them shimmered slightly, like heat waves on summer pavement. The fact that their beauty was so perfect it approached the alien. But loneliness is its own kind of courage. "Dante," he said, moving toward them. "And you're right. I could use a story, or at least a drink that helps me forget my own." Celine's smile was slow and dangerous. "Oh, we can offer you something far better than forgetting."
Confessions under starlight. Dante poured himself whiskey from the unmanned bar, his hands steadier than they should be. When he returned, Nix had somehow procured a bottle of something that glowed faintly violet in its crystal decanter. She filled 3 glasses with liquid that moved like captured aurora. "Family recipe," she said with a small smile, "from very, very far from here." The first sip tasted like winter air and lightning and something sweet he couldn't name. It warmed him from the inside out, loosening the tight knot in his chest that had lived there for months. Celine and Nix watched him with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but instead felt like being truly seen for the first time in years. "You're heartbroken," Celine said bluntly, tilting her head. "Recently. The frequency of it is exquisite, All that pain mixed with stubborn, stupid hope. She leaned forward, and Dante caught a scent like ozone and honey. "Tell us, what did she do to you?" He shouldn't. These were strangers, possibly dangerous ones given how strange they were. But the drink, the storm, the surreal intimacy of three people alone in a sleeping hotel, it all loosened his tongue. "She said she loved me but wasn't in love with me, that I was safe but not exciting, that she'd said yes to the proposal because she thought she should want what I was offering, but she couldn't go through with it." I laughed bitterly. 5 years. I built our whole future in my head. Turns out I was the only architect on that project. Nix reached across the small table and took his hand. Her touch was cool and sent small sparks up his arm, not painful but electric, alive. "She was frightened," Nix said softly. "Some people are terrified of their own depth. It wasn't about you being insufficient, it was about her not being ready for someone who could love that completely." "Nix is wise," Celine said, though her eyes glittered with something more playful. "I, however, think your ex is a fool. The kind of love you're capable of," she paused and something flickered across your perfect features, "it's rare, precious. We can feel it radiating off you like heat from a star." "We?" Dante looked between them, that prickle of wrongness returning. "Who are you really? And don't say travelers, you're something else." The sisters exchanged a glance, some wordless communication passing between them. Nix squeezed his hand gently. "If we tell you the truth, you'll think you're dreaming or drunk or mad, but you deserve honesty, especially tonight." Celine stood, and as she moved to the window, Dante could see through her for just a moment, her body a shell of light, holding a shape that wanted to scatter into 1,000 glowing particles. "We are Stellari," she said quietly, "from what you would call the constellation Etheron, though it's dying now, collapsing in on itself. My people are energy beings. We gave up physical form millennia ago in pursuit of pure consciousness, pure thought. But we lost something in that transcendence. We forgot what it means to feel with a body, to touch and hunger and ache, to love knowing that love can hurt you. Tonight is the only night we can maintain these forms." Celine turned back to him, and her amber eyes were suddenly vulnerable. "We have until dawn. Then we dissolve and return to the spaces between stars. We've visited Earth before, observed from a distance, but your grief tonight," she pressed a hand to her chest, "it called to us like a beacon. You're suffering, but you haven't hardened. You still believe in love even though it betrayed you." Dante should run, should laugh, should do anything but sit here accepting this impossible story. But as he looked at them, at the way the air shimmered around their edges, at the faint glow beneath their skin, at the ancient sadness in their inhuman eyes, he knew they were telling the truth. "What do you want from me?" His voice came out rough. Nix's smile was gentle, heartbreaking. "We want to learn what we lost, and perhaps teach you what you have forgotten." Celine moved closer, standing behind his chair, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. He could feel heat radiating from her palms. "We want one night to experience physical love in all its forms, the tender and the fierce, the slow and the desperate, to give you something that heals while we learn what it means to be beautifully, temporarily mortal." "It's your choice entirely," Nick said, bringing his hand to her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft, and beneath it he could feel something humming, vibrating at a frequency just past hearing. "Say no, and we'll fade from your memory like a pleasant dream. Say yes, and we'll show you what love feels like when it's untethered from fear of ending." Dante's heart hammered. This was insane, impossible. And yet... "Yes," he whispered. "God help me, yes." The sisters smiled, and the room filled with light.
The suite of forgotten dreams. They led him up staircases he didn't remember from his earlier exploration. Celine's hand warm in his left, Nix's cool in his right. The hotel seemed to shift around them, walls lengthening, doors appearing that hadn't existed before. Or perhaps it was just the way the stormlight played tricks through ancient windows. The penthouse suite at the top of the northern tower was unlocked, as if it had been waiting. Inside, it was a dream of old luxury. A massive four-poster bed draped in deep blue velvet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the churning sea, candles that lit themselves as they entered. The storm pressed against the glass, and beyond it, impossibly, stars were visible through breaks in the clouds. "We bent the rules a little," Nix admitted, closing the door behind them. "Made this space exist slightly outside normal time. The night will be longer here. We have hours, not minutes." Dante stood in the center of the room, trembling slightly, from cold, from anticipation, from the sheer unreality of it all. Celine circled him slowly, her copper dress shimmering. "You are afraid," she observed, not unkindly. "Of what? That will hurt you? That this is a trick? That I'll wake up? That this is just loneliness making me hallucinate? Or that it's real and I'll never feel anything this extraordinary again?" Nix stepped close, cupping his face in her cool hands. "Then let us make it so real you'll carry it in your bones forever. Let us show you that your capacity to feel deeply isn't a flaw, it's everything." She kissed him, and it was like falling into winter water, shocking and electrifying and utterly alive. Her lips tasted like frost and dark chocolate, and when her tongue touched his, small sparks jumped between them. Dante gasped into her mouth, his hands coming up to her waist, feeling the way her body seemed to thrum beneath his palms. When they broke apart, Celine was there, spinning him to face her. Where Nix had been gentle, Celine was hunger. She kissed him like she was drowning and he was air, all teeth and heat and fierce possession. Her hands tangled in his hair, and he could feel the warmth of her bleeding through his sweater, making him arch into her. "Both of us," she murmured against his mouth, "all night. No jealousy, no rules, just three people learning each other." They undressed him slowly, taking turns. Nix peeled away his sweater with reverent touches, her cool fingers tracing the lines of his shoulders, his collarbone, the curve of his ribs. Celine unfastened his jeans with deft movements, her warm hands sliding the denim down his legs. He stood before them vulnerable and exposed, and instead of shame, he felt seen in a way that made his throat tight. "Your turn," he managed, voice rough. Celine's dress dissolved like morning mist, and beneath it, her skin glowed faintly copper, as if tiny stars lived beneath the surface. Her body was all lean strength and dangerous curves, and when Dante reached out to touch her hip, she shivered, her eyes fluttering closed. "Careful," she breathed. "We feel everything more intensely in these forms. Every touch is—" She gasped as his hand traveled up her side, "like lightning." Nix's midnight dress fell away in shadows, revealing pale skin that seemed to collect the candlelight and hold it. She was softer than her sister, all gentle curves and quiet invitation. When Dante pulled her close, skin to skin, she made a sound low in her throat that shot straight to his core. They moved to the bed in a tangle, all three of them learning the geography of each other. Celine kissed a trail down his throat while Nix captured his mouth again. Dante's hands roamed, discovering the way Celine's breath hitched when he traced her spine, how Nix trembled when his fingers ghosted across her hip bones. "Tell us what you need," Nix whispered in his ear. "We want to give you everything." "I don't know," Dante admitted, overwhelmed by sensation. I haven't felt wanted like this. Haven't felt safe enough to want." Celine rose above him, straddling his hips, her copper hair falling around them like a curtain.
Then let us show you. Let us worship you the way you deserve. She leaned down, kissing him slowly, deeply, while her sister's hands explored everywhere else. Time became strange. They mapped him with lips and fingers, and whispered praise in two languages, English and something else that sounded like music, like wind through distant canyons. Dante gave as good as he got, learning the taste of Celine's neck, the sensitive spot behind Nyx's knee, the way they both gasped when he kissed the hollow of their throats. More, Celine demanded, her body rolling against him in a rhythm that made him dizzy. Slowly, Nyx countered, her touch gentle on his face. Let him breathe. Let him feel. They found a balance, the three of them, fierce and tender, desperate and patient. As the storm raged outside and candles burned low, Dante learned that healing and pleasure could be the same thing.
Bodies of light. Somewhere past midnight, the boundaries between them dissolved entirely. They moved like a single organism with three hearts, each responding to what the others needed before words could form. Celine's fierce passion taught Dante that desire didn't have to be gentle to be loving. Nyx's tender exploration showed him that vulnerability could be power. Dante found himself between them, Celine's lips on his mouth, demanding and hot, while Nyx traced patterns on his back that seemed to sink into his skin, warming him from the inside out. When he turned his attention to Celine, kissing down the column of her throat to the hollow between her breasts, she arched beneath him with a cry that sounded like shattering glass, beautiful and sharp. "Yes," she hissed, her hands fisting in his hair. "Don't hold back. We're not fragile." But when he looked at Nyx, she smiled that soft smile and guided his hand to her thigh. "Though we do appreciate tenderness," she murmured, pulling him into a kiss that tasted like starlight and promises. They took turns. Sometimes two of them focused on the third, sometimes all three joined in ways that defied simple description. Dante discovered that making love to Celine was like dancing in a wildfire, exhilarating, dangerous, leaving him breathless and branded. With Nyx, it was like being submerged in deep water, cool and enveloping and impossibly gentle. At one point, Celine lay beneath him, her legs wrapped around his waist as he moved inside her, while Nyx pressed against his back, kissing his shoulders, whispering encouragement. The sensation of being surrounded by them, held and wanted and urged on, cracked something open in Dante's chest that had been locked tight for months. "I forgot," he gasped, one hand braced beside Celine's head, the other reaching back to tangle with Nyx's. "I forgot I could feel this much." "Good," Celine panted, her amber eyes glowing brighter as pleasure built in waves. "Feel everything. Let it unmake you." When she shattered beneath him, her body lit up from within, copper light blooming under her skin like captured sunset. Dante followed her over the edge, and for a moment he could swear he felt what she felt, that electric joy that was both completely physical and utterly transcendent. Later, minutes or hours, impossible to tell, he lay back while they explored him with unhurried devotion. Nyx's mouth traveled down his chest, taking her time, while Celine whispered in his ear all the ways he was beautiful, all the ways his heartbreak had made him more rather than less. "Your ex was wrong," Celine said fiercely, biting gently at his earlobe. "You aren't safe. You're terrifying. The kind of man who loves with everything, who builds cathedrals out of devotion." Her hand slid down his stomach. That kind of love could reshape worlds. Nyx looked up at him with those violet eyes, and the care in them made his throat tight. "And that kind of love deserves to be matched," she said softly. "Deserves someone brave enough to stand in it without flinching." She showed him what she meant, loving him with a patience that bordered on worship, until Dante was trembling, undone, remade. When he pulled her up to kiss her, tasting himself on her lips, he understood what they'd been trying to teach him all night, that being open wasn't weakness, that letting yourself be vulnerable, be touched,
be changed, that was the bravest thing any being could do. They made love again as the hour grew small, all three tangled together in ways that felt less like sex and more like alchemy. Dante discovered that he could bring Nyx to climax by whispering against her skin how beautiful she was, how grateful she was for her gentleness. He learned that Selene craved being held down, challenged, met with equal fierceness. Together, Selene commanded at one point, and they arranged themselves so that Dante was inside her, while Nyx pressed close, their hands intertwined, lips meeting in a three-way kiss that tasted like honey and ozone and desperation. When they came this time, all three at once, the room filled with light, copper and violet and something silvery that Dante realized was coming from him, his own soul responding to theirs. In the afterglow, they lay in a tangle of limbs and sweat-dampened skin. Selene traced lazy patterns on Dante's chest, while Nyx's head rested on his shoulder, her midnight hair spilling across him like water. "You've changed us," Nyx said quietly. "We came here to learn about physical love, but you've taught us something deeper. That love isn't just sensation, it's choice, courage, surrender." Selene propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him seriously. "In all our observations, we have never encountered a human who could feel this purely. Most are so guarded, so afraid. But you," she touched his face gently, "you gave us everything." "You did the same," Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again. But this, we know. We feel it too," Nyx whispered, kissing his shoulder. Outside the window, the stars wheeled overhead, and the storm began to quiet. Dawn was still hours away, but Dante could feel time pressing in, the night growing finite. He pulled them both closer, memorizing the weight of them, the way they fit against his body. They would leave. The sun would rise. But for now, in this impossible space outside normal time, he had been seen, wanted, healed. And that would be enough. It would have to be.
Dawn and departure. They loved him once more as the darkness thinned, slow and desperate and achingly sweet. All three of them knew it was ending, could feel the approaching dawn like a tide pulling them apart. Dante tried to memorize everything: the taste of Selene's skin, the sound of Nyx's breathless laughter, the way they both whispered his name like a prayer. When they finally lay still, wrapped around each other in exhausted contentment, the first hint of gray light appeared at the horizon. Nyx saw it first, and Dante felt her body tense against his. "It's time," she said softly. "No!" Dante tightened his arms around them. "Not yet, please!" Selene kissed his jaw, his cheek, his mouth, fierce, claiming kisses that tasted like goodbye. "We don't control when our forms fail," she said, and for the first time she heard genuine sadness in her voice. "But listen to me, Dante Marlowe. What you gave us tonight, the trust, the vulnerability, the sheer intensity of your feeling, we will carry that back to the spaces between stars. You've given two immortal beings the gift of knowing what it means to be mortal and still choose love." Nyx cupped his face, her violet eyes shimmering with something that looked like tears, though he wasn't sure beings of energy could cry. "And you, don't go back to being afraid. Don't let what happened with her make you smaller. You were made for epic love, the kind that reshapes people." She kissed both his eyelids gently. "Find someone brave enough to meet you there." Already they were changing. Their edges grew less solid, their bodies becoming translucent. Dante could see through Selene's shoulder to the candles beyond. Through Nyx's hand resting on his chest, he could see his own skin. "I don't want to forget you," he choked out. "You won't," Selene promised, even as her copper hair began to dissolve into streams of light. "We're burning ourselves into you. Look." She placed her palm over his heart, and Nyx did the same. Where they touched, his skin glowed, faint but unmistakable, copper on the left, violet on the right. The light sank into him, warming, marking, blessing. "Part of us will always be here," Nyx whispered. "In your heartbeat, in the way you love. We're not leaving you, Dante. We're becoming part of you." The sun crept higher. Their bodies unraveled faster now, becoming ribbons of colored light that swirled around him. Celine's laugh echoed in the air, fierce and joyful. Nyx's last touch was a cool caress against his cheek. "Thank you," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing into something that sounded like music, like the aurora itself singing. "Thank you for teaching us what it means to be alive." Then they were gone, dissolving into a cascade of copper and violet light that spiraled upward through the ceiling, through the roof, up into the pre-dawn sky. Dante watched them go, his face wet with tears he didn't remember starting. The room returned to normal. The candles were just candles, now burned low. The bed was just a bed, though the sheets still smelled like ozone and something sweet. The windows showed an ordinary Scottish morning, gray and rain-washed. Dante sat up slowly, his body aching in 100 places, each ache a reminder. He looked down at his chest where they'd touched him last, and the marks were still there, faint glimmers of copper and violet just beneath his skin, over his heart. He pressed his hand there and felt his pulse, strong and steady, and somehow different than it had been yesterday. On the pillow beside him lay a single feather, iridescent, shifting colors as he turned it in the light. It shouldn't exist, not in any natural world he understood, but it was real and solid in his hand, proof that they had been real, that the impossible night had actually happened. Dante dressed slowly, tucking the feather carefully into his pocket. He descended through a hotel that was exactly as he remembered it from last night. All the magical doors and extended hallways returned to ordinary geometry. At the front desk, a sleepy clerk told him the storm had passed and the roads were clear. He drove south as the sun rose higher, but something had changed. The grief that had been a leaden weight in his chest for months felt different now, lighter, transmuted into something that glowed softly with warmth instead of pain. He didn't hurt less, but the hurt no longer felt like damage. It felt like proof that he was capable of depth, of devotion, of loving so completely that even the loss of it left him richer rather than diminished. Years passed. Dante built a career designing buildings that seemed to capture impossible light, structures that made people stop and stare at the way the sun moved through them. He loved again, eventually, a woman named Marina who was brave and fierce and tender, who looked at the faint marks on his chest and asked their story. He told her everything. She didn't believe in aliens, but she believed in what the experience had taught him, that vulnerability was strength, that love required courage, that being open to pain was the only way to be open to joy. On their wedding night, as Marina fell asleep in his arms, Dante noticed something strange. The aurora borealis danced outside their window, though they were too far south for it to be visible. In the shifting colors, he saw two familiar shapes twining together, one copper, one violet. Years after that, astronomers reported a curious phenomenon. In the constellation Acheron, which had been dark and dying, two new stars had suddenly ignited. They burned in perfect synchronization, pulsing in a rhythm that puzzled scientists. Some thought it looked like a heartbeat. Others called it a binary system unlike any other. But Dante knew what it was. Two immortal beings who had learned what it meant to be mortal, to love physically and fiercely and briefly, and carrying that knowledge back into the cosmos. Two stars burning with the memory of a single night, when energy became flesh, when three souls touched and transformed each other. He kept the iridescent feather in a small box on his desk,
Sometimes, when light hit it just right, it glowed copper and violet, and he felt the marks on his chest warm in response. And he remembered what they'd taught him, that the capacity to feel everything, to love completely, to remain open even after heartbreak, wasn't just human. It was universal. Lessons from the stars. Love is not the absence of ending, but the courage to feel fully despite it. The most profound connections transform us not because they last forever, but because they teach us we are capable of intensity, vulnerability, and transcendent joy. Heartbreak is not damage, but expansion. Pain proves our capacity for depth. When we love with everything and lose, we don't become less. We become vessels large enough to hold the entire universe. True intimacy requires surrendering control. The greatest pleasure, the deepest healing comes not from protecting ourselves, but from allowing ourselves to be seen, touched, and changed by those brave enough to meet us in our wholeness. We are never the same after we choose to feel everything. Every connection that cracks us open leaves us marked with light, burning a little brighter, a little more courageously, forever altered by the knowledge that we are capable of love that reshapes worlds.